Thank you. We're going to go into Committee of the Whole. Open up the meeting with presentation from the Community Preservation Committee. Please state your name.
My name is Michael Scholes. I'm the current chairman of the Community Preservation Commission. I've been there since the vote of 2002. The vote was in 2001. The committee was established in 2002. So we have now been there for 16 years. And the mayor has asked us to make a presentation as to what we've done for 16 years, because basically most of you weren't here back then when this started. And there's been some questions lately which, you know, deserve good answers, and we're here to answer any of the questions that you may have. We're going to, hopefully you all got your book here. This is not everything. This is most of the things we've done. There is one item in here that is a mistake, and that's the Walnut Street Park. We did not purchase that one. We had voted on it to purchase it, and it went through, and then basically...
Motion to receive?
Then basically the money came in from the state, and so they gave us the money back. Even we had to chase them for it, but they gave us the money back. So the Walnut Street Park was not ours, even though we had gone for it. If you look at the numbers, you'll see where most of the money has gone. We've been asking for help because it must be spent in 3 areas: affordable housing, open space and recreation, and historical. And that's it. So every year we set aside 10% of our incoming money. It goes into those 3 things. And then from there we float money back and forth between it. But money is put in to those 3 items every single year. The original thing with the act was we got a 100% match. And that has been taken away by the state, so it's now down to 20-something. But from what I'm hearing, it's going to increase. Okay, we're one of the longest serving, and we've done it. I'm quite proud to say this commission has done an excellent job of abiding by the rules. We have really done what it is so that it's not a tax, it's a fee. You know, I get some people that give me the, you know, oh, no, it's a tax. It could be a tax if you did it wrong, but it's a fee. It was voted on by 52%, okay? Mayor Bonfanti was the one who put it in initially, and it went by 52%. Most of those votes, by the way, came out of Ward 1. So that's just a, you know, a note, because there was a lot of development going on at that time. The current mayor was a member of the commission. You got Councilor McGinn and Councilor Gould, who have done an excellent job attending meetings, and they're great help to us. Originally, there was supposed to be 1 councilor and 1 general public. And when we got it and we passed the law, we altered it and put on 1 more of each of those, both of the council and of the general public. So some of the people have been there from the very beginning, like Mike Rizzo, Darren Kelly, Andy Metropolis. Ted Neary was on, and then he left and came back. Stu Lazaris just got reappointed on. So these people have been on this since 2002. So that's a pretty stable commission. And the commission itself is made up of different boards in the city: the Housing Authority, Conservation Commission, Planning Board, City Council, Historic Commission, Park Commission. Okay, so we get, you know, people from each of those. The average of cost to a homeowner is 1% of their tax bill. So if your tax bill is $4,500, it's $45. Okay? It's shown on your tax bill exactly what the Community Preservation Act costs you. We have an example in the packet, and it says like $80, but remember that's broken up 4 times, for your taxes. So it's because we're only 1%, and we're working fine with that money. We've got money in the bank, and we've spent it. We haven't spent a lot lately because we've been paying off some of the big purchases we did. Tilly's Farm and things like that. We've done money into the Crystal Lake, and we're doing money into the parks. That law was changed. Originally, we couldn't do the parks, but they added that you could renovate parks if you're doing new stuff. That's how we've done some of the school playgrounds, because we've had to create new playgrounds. So it's creating new recreation. So basically, each month we meet, other than August and December, and we do. Each thing is brought to us. We do not create items to come to us. They have to come from somebody else. We do not initiate anything. So when something comes to us, it goes in 3 stages: the acceptance, the discussion, and then the vote. And sometimes we do, because of emergency situations, void that and help it through, because some of the city applications have things like that. But I do want to point out that we do need help. We need stuff to come from someplace in the city on affordable housing. We've got the money to spend for affordable housing. We need affordable housing. We're looking to do it. All we've done is Park Street, and we did a lot with the renovations. The housing rehab thing was great. We put a couple of $100,000 a year in it, but they're not doing it anymore. The community development they don't have anybody to do it anymore. So that's kind of sat in the wayside. So if you look at the numbers, you'll see that $1,667,000 on housing. Where open space, we got $8 million spent on open space. Of course, it's like $2 million for Tilly's and stuff like that, and a lot of these things for the bikeways and things like that. And then the historical is $3 million. So we've spent it well. I'm going to ask, because Ted put together the book, I'm going to ask Ted Neary. Ted and Diane, our secretary, put it together. I'm going to turn it over to them to go and tell you what we've done and present it from there. Then I'll take it from there afterwards. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ted Neary. I am the Housing Authority alternate on the Community Preservation Committee. As Mike said, in front of you, you have the PowerPoint presentation that I put in paper form because you don't want to hear me drone on for 3 hours with a little clicker and show you on a screen. So I have this in paper form along with an addendum that I added to your package when I came in, which pretty much gives a synopsis of what we've spent from 2002 to 2018. I also have this in electronic format if you should happen to want it, which I'm not sure why you would, but I can provide that for you if you want it. And in just speaking with the mayor, we will put it up on the website as well, just so the general public who may be watching can get a better understanding of what we do, why we do, and what we have done for the past 16, 17 years. So with that said, a lot of this information that I created from documentation and pictures and things like that was taken from various sources, from the state website, from our own database that Diane and Diane unfortunately is not here. Diane Marchese. We collaborated. She gave me the list. I went through, took pictures of all the various locations, and I did not put everything in here. This is about 92% of everything that we funded and we voted on, because some of it was redundancy, and quite frankly, some of these places I couldn't find, so my Waze wouldn't take me there. So with that, again, our database, the newspapers, researching old newspaper articles were a great help, and that's where we arrived at this. So I think that's, if you have any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them, but I'm going to turn it back over to more knowledgeable folks. And as a side note, if anybody out there ever wants to research or have in-depth questions on what the Community Preservation Act is, how we fund it, there is no better resource to go than this guy. He's an absolute encyclopedia on this whole law, so thank you. Thank you, Steve. Oh, right here.
If you would, I think the mayor had something that he'd like to say. Mr. Schultz, if you wait one moment.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to take a moment to thank Mike, Ted, all the members of the Community Preservation Committee that are here today, the councilors that serve currently and have served in the past. It's been a true blessing for our community to have the community development, community preservation as part of our city. You know, just going through the packet, reading through the projects that the Community Preservation Committee has touched, it's really remarkable. And many of the projects that we've done that really have made an impact on our city, the Scouting Way retention pond, the Crystal Lake project, things that have really made a difference in our community, have been funded in large part by the Community Preservation Committee. And I'm not sure if some of these projects, whether they're large projects or small projects, the playgrounds, the bike trails, the nature walks, if those would have been accomplished without the Community Preservation Committee. Often they come in at the very end to put in the final piece of the puzzle to make these projects work. But historic preservation, affordable housing, open space, recreation, all of them have been helped greatly by the men and women who have served on the committee and the good work that they've done. It's a committee that I think all of you have been to and been a part of. You've seen the work, you've seen the care and the compassion and the interest and the love of the city that each of the members shows. It's been wonderful for us. So I wanted to thank them. This went above and beyond my expectations as to the presentation. Tremendous work went into this. To see the pictures and the information is truly remarkable. And again, it's been a blessing for our community. It's made a difference. So much work has been able to take place, and so many improvements and an impact has really been made by the Community Preservation Committee, its members, and the community for supporting it. So I just wanted to recognize the fine work everybody has done. Certainly, I'm here to answer any questions as well.
Is there any questions from the council? Councilor Manny Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Schultz, the CPA, did CPA money fund the Low Street purchase, the Brody's building, or was that CPC? CPA? Okay.
Oh, CPC, which is Community Preservation Committee.
Okay, so
Just
it was
just
CPA money.
The land.
Okay, so, yeah, because I don't see it on the 2018, you only have $11,000, so maybe that one's not up to date yet. So could you tell me how that fell into the requirements of CPA? Because I get a lot of questions about that building in particular, because you use CPA money and knocked it down to create open space. That's allowable?
Yeah, that's going to, creating a new park, okay? And from my understanding, that's where the George Peabody statue will be going.
Okay, so even without, aside from the George Peabody statue, just knocking the building down to create a park?
Yeah, we didn't do the knocking down of the building, I don't believe.
I'm sorry.
We just purchased the land.
Excuse me, right. You purchased the land, so, and now that'll be a separate act to knock it down, but so to purchase the land to create new open space,
It's going to be a new park.
a new park is,
A little, like a pocket park right there.
okay. So that's allowable under the CPA. I do get a lot of questions about that one, and I want to make sure that I can answer it accurately. So it is allowable.
Yes, yeah, yes,
Purchase land to create a new
Yeah.
space. Okay, thank you.
yes. So sometimes with some of these things, like, let's just say, let me just bring up Salem. I was talking with, not Mayor Yusevich, but with Mayor Driscoll, and I was saying, you know, some of the things you're doing over there aren't really right. And she goes, what? You know, and I said, and so I told her she's coming for they want to do new stuff on the municipal golf course. And I'm saying, you want to do new paths on the municipal golf course with CPC money? She said, yeah. I said, well, that's maintenance. That's, you know, that's a municipal thing, you know. And she said, well, how would you do it? I said, well, if you were creating new paths, you know, you were creating new stuff. See, that's the line, is to create a new park, not like renovating the roof, okay? We did the historic part. The city paid for the roof, okay? A little creative, but that's how it works. We weren't doing maintenance on the roof, okay? We did the historic part, the slate, the stuff like that. So that's how we were able to do that. So Mayor Driscoll said, okay, so we're going to do new paths on the golf course.
Okay, so along those lines, then, when you say we use the CPA money through the CPC to purchase the land, and when it's broken down, the land and the building was the total amount used in order to purchase that building. So we essentially bought the building with CPA money. It's broken down. It's broken down. You bought the building and the land. Isn't that correct?
I thought we did the land. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. The part of the funds was used for the purchase of the building and land. It's both, building and land. It's the purchase of the property to be used as open space. Some people are using park. I don't necessarily agree with the word park. To me, it's open space, and it fits perfectly the definition.
Okay. That's the question I get. They understand that the CPA money, you can purchase land, but I guess they're just not agreeing with that you could purchase a building with CPA money and then demolish it.
Absolutely, Council, you can.
Well, that's why I'm asking, Mayor. He's the expert, and he's up here to present it, so I was asked to ask him some questions, so that's all I'm doing.
Absolutely, no, and I'm answering that. Absolutely, you can. We purchased Tilly's Farm, $2.6 million. There are a number of buildings on that property. So we have certainly the right, once we own the property, to remove buildings if we think it's in the best of the public interest and to create open space. Absolutely, that's been done at Tilly's Farm. Now that we have ownership of that farm, based on CPA money, community preservation money, we have now the ability to remove buildings if we don't think they're in the best interests of our objectives. So there's been a number of properties, other properties that we've done the same thing on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Sasslaw.
Thank you. I just had a question, Chairman. You had mentioned, obviously, that you don't bring the projects to the table, that the public brings the projects to the table, and you brought up affordable housing, and that is the thing that obviously we know there's a dire need, and it's been the least amount of money that you've been able to dedicate, probably because there's been a few projects. But when you say you need help from the public on affordable housing, can you be more specific? Because I'm not quite sure what that even means.
When I say public, I'm basically saying the city, the council, you know, whoever, you know, because we can't create the project. The project's got to be brought to us. So if someone comes to us with a project for affordable housing, looking for money to help make it affordable, we're there, okay, as is the state. So there's state money available now I happened to mention at the inauguration to Jay Ash, and he was like all over it like that. So, I mean, there is money
So,
available. We
So-
just need the project.
so I'm still trying to grasp it. So you're suggesting maybe if there's a private home, I don't want to, are you suggesting maybe a private homeowner might want to turn their property into affordable housing? I'm still trying to get it. I'm still trying to get what type of help or what type of proposals would be something that we could do for affordable housing. Like, give me like one of the examples. All this stuff that you did affordable housing, were these
Okay.
private properties that you bought that we rehabbed, or I'm just trying to, on a good note, I'm trying to figure
No,
out.
that's a good question, Counselor. So to give you an example of a project that we did in the past was Habitat for Humanity. Habitat for Humanity would purchase some property. They would come to us for some assistance for affordable housing purposes. Another one could be Harbor Lights. That's a nonprofit that would potentially do a housing project here in the city. The North Shore CDC, a project that typically they're nonprofits, but is, as Mr. Schultz said, it's a situation where they as a committee can't really come forward with an idea. It's usually we help somebody who has an idea here in the city of Peabody, and we would assist with the funding.
Sounds like a lot of it is nonprofits coming.
Yes.
Looking. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. My only personal, I compliment all the members, both past and present. It's a committee that's near and dear to my heart. I'm proud that we do it. I'm glad to hear that maybe the money's coming back because we know how much money we've gained. I looked at it, to be quite frank with you, and I can't believe it was 8 years ago we did the Burke School Playground that I was a chair of, and so time flies. And I know there have been other parks that have been done. So I've served on the committee. I've done projects. I think it's a great asset to the city. I'll always support it. I did have one question. I know there was a question at one point about if there was money taken to do a playground, that there had to be some type of reserve. And I thought I had heard some scuttlebutt that maybe that reserve component was going to go away. And are you familiar? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, they came to me on that. Beverly Griffin Dunn came to me and a few other people. That's one of the questions we get. Okay, we don't set an amount. Okay, when we do a project, one of the things is who's going to maintain it. Okay, so that goes with every application. Who's going to maintain it? Like Grandview Ave was Conservation Commission. So lately we've been doing a whole lot, and the Parks and Rec have been taking it. Now, we don't set a dollar amount. We just say, because there was something somebody said, we said $10,000 for these, non-existent, just rumor. So basically, everything we want to know is who's going to maintain it. That's listed. So when you get a question on that, that's what it is.
Thank you very much. And once again, I support the work you do. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mike, I just want to say thank you. It's the mayor appointed me to this committee shortly before I was elected, the year before I was elected to office, and I was hopeful that I'd be able to stay on it, largely due to the group of people that are on this. I wish more people knew everything that you do, because this committee does an unbelievable job. And the thing that makes me most proud about it is you guys protect this money very, very, very well. And there's some excellent discussion and back and forth on where this money gets spent, and I'm very confident in that committee. But back to Councilor Manning Martin's question regarding the Brody's building, and Mr. President, through you to the mayor. Mayor, I hate to put you on the spot, but if you remember, wasn't there another fund that we took money out of for the purchase of that building? And I thought, and Councilor Manning Martin had mentioned it that night, it was the sale of city properties fund,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken. So that paid for a portion of this besides CPC. So it was both CPC and that fund that paid for the purchase of that land and building?
Yes, thank you. You actually jogged my memory. It was, yes, we have a fund that is the sale and purchase of real estate. It's a separate fund outside the general fund for instances such as these, or if there's a small parcel of land that we would purchase or sell, it would go into that to be used. So it was predominantly the purchase price was from that account, and the CPC just supplemented that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to, I was thinking as we were talking about it, but, and Mayor, thank you. Mr. President, through you to Mr. Schultz, you had mentioned in your opening monologue that the housing rehabilitation program, that community development wasn't able to administer it anymore. Did we lose somebody in community development? Because I thought we still have the same staff, and I'm wondering why we can't administer it now, but we were able to for multiple years prior to this.
Yes, I don't know. They just told us that they don't have that anymore. They've come to us with an emergency fund thing that they run with Habitat, and we gave them some money for that, and it hasn't been spent. I thought that rehab thing was fantastic. It was going through every ward, every needy person, like an elderly person whose house had been let down and was bringing down the other houses around it. They gave them like $20,000 or $25,000, and they'd upgrade the house, vinyl siding, electric, windows, roof, things like that. And if they stayed there for 7 years, it went away, but it kept the places affordable. It improved the neighborhood. It helped out our own taxpayers, citizens, and stuff like that. It was a great program, and we were given a couple of $100,000 a year on it, and then it just went away, and we kept asking, you know, because we need to spend more money on the affordable housing.
Thank you, and I guess, Mayor, again, because you're the only one here, I wish Kurt had stayed, but can we re-implement that program and maybe have the new gentleman with community development, Mr. Levin? Yes. Maybe we could assign that to him, because Mr. Schultz is entirely correct. That's a great program for some of our elderly residents and some of our people in need that may have a furnace or a roof that needs to be repaired and just can't do it. And I could think of a few off the top of my head, and I don't see how it doesn't seem that difficult to administer that money to some of those people, and it would definitely fall under affordable housing. So it's just a good use for that money. But thank you again for everything this board does, and I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. And, you know, I want to mention I've enjoyed having you there, because you know what the things go through when we get there. You know the discussions we go through. You open it up, I'll give my view on it, and then it opens and it goes right around the table, and you know, may change my view, etc. But then they always vote, and then from there it goes to you folks. You know, so you folks have the final word, because it's, you know, it's city money, and we ask you to look at the projects and see if you think that they're, you know, that they meet the criteria. You know, that's your thing in it. You know, initially, it was only going to have like one counselor on it. But the late, great Joyce Spiliotis came in and insisted they get two counselors. And so Mayor Bonfanti said, okay, we'll have two general public too. And so that changed the outcome of the thing. And these folks right here, I'm sure you recognize most of them, because they're on many of the commissions, and they're the longtime people, and they know what they're doing. And when we go through stuff, we go through stuff, and it's really vetted big time. So when we come out and recommend it, it's really been vetted. And anytime anybody's got any questions, just call me at home. You know, Diane will answer them, stuff like that, and she's terrific.
Thank you. Council Melville.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have one question and one comment through you. What's the, I see a lot of the dollar amounts here. What's the current balance at?
I don't really want to tell you. No, we're sitting with about $3 million.
Peter would be
Still.
the one today.
Yeah, am I right, Pete? Yeah. That's the man in charge of the checkbook, you know.
Excellent. So through you, Mr. President, you know, my one comment is, first of all, it's clearly you're doing a lot of great work. The more of this information line items with the projects, the better for your committee, the better for the community. If you look at what a lot of communities do throughout the country, is they kind of line item where your taxes go with regards to certain projects and capital projects. And I think the more the taxpayer sees where their dollars are going, whether they agree with it or not, the transparency frees up you, the government body, to feel like you can do what you think is in the best interest. So I would just, my one comment would be just to continue to line item these things for people to see, because I think it's impressive, and it goes back some ways, and a lot of the stuff that you did in 2002 is still viable today, and it appears to be a good investment. And I think the more the taxpayer sees that, the more accountability that they will give you to be able to continue those projects. So that would be my comment on that. Thank you.
Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, I would just echo the other council's comments that thank you for your work, all the committee members, and the work you've done. And what I'd ask is almost just double what Councilor Melville said. If there's a way to put this presentation on the city's website, I have no idea how that could be done. The line item is great. I mean, a lot of things we see on this list, they're outside, but, I've been in the city for, almost 50 years, and I'd never been inside the Sutton Room, and it was stunning, the work that had been done. So, fully support your work, and if there's any way to put this on the website so the residents can see it, that would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Neri, you had something to say?
Actually, to both of your points, there is a state website that also has all of this information as well, and I just spoke to the mayor. We have this. Diane, I should say, has it. So along with this presentation, I also asked that we're going to have that posted as well on the website, because when you look at that, you go, wow, you guys actually do something. So it will happen.
Thank you. Is there any other councilors had any other take? Because of the consideration with time, we'd like to move right along unless you had anything really important to say for a minute. We just need to get this meeting behind.
Everybody for your help. When you have questions, when stuff comes down, we're there, and we don't have a meeting next month like you folks in December. But you're welcome anytime. Thank you for giving us the two good councils you have on it.
Thank you. Thank you to your committee also. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, before you adjourn.
Councilor.
The mayor's letter, item 7C, should be received to this.
Motion to receive. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Adjourn.
Motion to adjourn to come back in regular session. 2 minutes. Like it open the regular meeting of the and start off with the silent prayer and pledge allegiance. Heard the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Open meeting law statement, the meeting is being televised live on cable channel 9 and being taped by our Peabody Access TV and also being recorded by our city's council stenographer. With that being said, we'll go to hearing A. The petitioner would like to come and state your name and address for the record. Petitioner.
Good evening, council members. My name is Chris Swiniarski. I'm an attorney for Verizon Wireless. So we are here tonight on a continued batch of petitions for grant of location for 14 utility pole wireless communications facilities. As I'm sure the council is aware, these are proposed as an offer of settlement for 2 separate land court cases in which the city is in litigation with Verizon Wireless. At the conclusion of the last meeting of the City Council, The council had given us 6 criteria to evaluate 7 of the proposed petitions for grant of location. We evaluated those over the last 2 weeks, and I just sort of jotted down my notes that are up on the screen, and I can give everyone a paper copy of that if you like, but it's really quite simple.
Have a motion to receive?
So moved.
Any opposed? All in favor? There's a vote.
There. Okay, so it looks like everyone has their copy. So really there were 6 criteria that the council had given us. 2 of those criteria, which were the last 2, I'll address first just because they apply sort of universally to the whole group rather than to specific polls. The first question was to address whether there's any sound created by these installations. There is not. There is no sound. The second question was whether the total number of installations could be reduced. And we really don't want to reduce that because any reduction is going to result in a loss of coverage. The idea of the settlement that we've proposed is to create a certain amount of coverage to address a gap that we have, so any reduction does create a loss in coverage. With that, the more specific criteria were the 4 points that you see on the top of the first page, and these were, again, given to us from the council at the last meeting. Council had requested that we look into moving these proposed poles further away from residences. Council had asked if we could use existing Verizon telecommunications utility poles. Council wanted us to see if we could match the height of the existing utility poles on the street in each of these areas. And fourth, the council had asked whether we could place these poles on the same side of the street as the current existing utility poles. So what you see on that first page, and really all I have for you is 1 page of information, is what we came up with. Largely, we've been able to address the requests of the council on every single one of these poles. On the first one, which is called Peabody SCO1 in our speak, we moved the pole away from the residences. It's now set in front of the gas company station, and it's adjacent to a National Grid check house. There are no Verizon telecommunications poles available. Generally, you're going to find there aren't any Verizon telecommunications poles available. If there were, we would have used those because we don't need permission to use those. So if we could use those, of course we would, but there aren't in these cases. Rather than explaining it to you, the reason I brought this is because we have a visual representation, which is much easier, and that'll be the next page of your packet and the picture that I have on the screen here. So you can see the yellow pin is the location in the initial petition for grant of location, and we've moved it here. This is the National Grid check house. So the residence of concern was right here, so now we've moved it away where we're virtually surrounded by commercial or at least non-residential property. The only residential property within the vicinity has a pretty substantial tree buffer here. So I think this accomplishes all of the objectives that the council asked for. We can also reduce this down to the height of the existing poles in this area. Does anyone have any questions on this one before I move to the next one?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Attorney Swiniarski, just to save me, and you may not have this, do you have street locations on these so I can go through these?
Yes, I do. They're back in the initial applications, which are the initial petitions, rather, which I can pull up right here.
Right, I have those. I was just wondering if you knew offhand, so I didn't have to search through this stack of.
I thought you guys would know because you live here. But let me pull it up. It should be right here.
Okay, so the first one is SCO1, which looks to be northwest intersection of Lowell and Birch.
Yes.
Okay. I have that one.
Just a point. Councilors, would you rather go through the whole list and then ask the questions, or would you like to go one by one? Just a feedback? Council McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think just through you to Attorney Swiniarski, just if you could jump back to that first page. Because there was one other criteria that was, or request that was made at the last council meeting. And it was late that night, so yeah, I know you had somebody standing in for you. But it was that the lights, I'm sorry, that for all 14 petitions, that the utilize poles that look like and function as light poles. Was that you didn't cover that in your overarching comments there? So, and I don't see anything here, so I just wanted you to address that, please. Thank you.
Correct. My colleague who is here for me did handwrite that on the written set of criteria that the council had given us. And I did check with my client on that, but right now we are not prepared to use those kinds of facilities for this matter. That really turns this into a much larger project, and in the scope of trying to settle the lawsuit that we have, I don't think it's really the efficient way to do it. It's a much bigger project when we turn these into light poles, especially if they're lit. And it might not look very good either.
Right, okay, thank you. Mr. President, I think it would be my preference to go through this feedback. I think this is, we asked for some information from the petitioner, and they're here to provide it. I think we should go through this page by page. That would be my preference.
Just, like I said, I just want to make sure if you want to go page by page, or just hold your questions for all the locations and come at once. But if you want to go one by one, just want to make sure I understood what, we'll go one by one. Any other councilors on the first poll? Councilor O'Neill.
Through you, Mr. President, to Attorney, is there any reason why the pole would not be located, adjacent to the National Grid check house? Closer to, rather than on the other side, near the residence?
Yes. One of the criteria that the council had was to locate the poles on the same side of the street as the wires right now. And I believe, yeah, so what we've done is we've put it on the same side as the pole line as indicated in the notes.
Thank you. It's just hard to see with the picture. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Manny Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I won't be voting this evening, just to disclose, I won't be voting this evening because I was not at the initial hearing that was 12:30 a.m. last meeting. But I can participate, but I won't vote. So my question to you, sir, is I see that this one pole is out in West Peabody, Ward 6. Well, it is in West Peabody, it's in Ward 6. So just to refresh my memory, the original purpose or intent of the request for the cell towers was to cover South Peabody gap in services, and now this pole is out in West Peabody. And I notice all of these poles are spattered throughout every ward in the city now. So if you could just enlighten me as to how we went from a gap in service in South Peabody only to now having all these poles in every ward of the city.
Sure, that's a valid point. What we were proposing initially in South Peabody was what we call a macro cell. That's a full wireless communications facility. It was so long ago now, I don't actually recall how many antennas were on that, and anywhere from 6 to 12 with a base station. These are small cells, one single small antenna designed to cover concentrated areas. This was the feedback and the direction that the city was giving us back during that hearing of the council, was that they wanted what was termed as a DAS system of smaller, more condensed antennas which cover smaller areas. So essentially, when you're comparing this to the previous proposal, this is a shrinking down and a densification, where instead of being up and having a large array of antennas at, I think it was at 60-something feet, if I remember correctly, you're now putting these down in the 30 to 40-foot range, and it's a single antenna, so it covers a much smaller area, and in order to effectively capture the same coverage area, you have to spread them out and disperse them.
Even all the way into West Peabody, though? That's where I'm kind of lost.
Yeah, I don't have the coverage maps from the initial application with me, but that was the design we came up with as the alternative that we're proposing for the settlement.
Okay, and you mentioned 60-foot tower, and that was Mike's Limousine, and then Coolidge, was that 60-foot as well?
Coolidge was 130, I believe. In excess of 100 anyway. I don't know if it was exactly 130, but I think it was 130.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lozano?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that point, so the two proposed cell towers in South Peabody were, in their design, was supposed to have the coverage all the way out to West Peabody?
Yes, it might not be the exact lines, but it covered a much larger area because it was a macro facility of directional antennas, and in the case of Coolidge, much taller as well.
Just as a follow-up, so what is, on average, a 60-foot pole macro coverage, as you called it? What is the diameter of coverage, and what would the same coverage be for a 100-foot pole on average?
Sorry, go ahead. Unfortunately, there is no average because it's dependent upon topography, buildings, and obstructions. So that's why we have a radio frequency engineering department that takes into account all those considerations. It's a question that I'm asked many times, but if it were that simple, our jobs would be much easier, but there just is no single number that they cover.
And then my last question is, looking at the changes in the poles, have the neighbors and the residents been notified of the pole locations?
No, the neighbors were not notified, to my knowledge, of these new proposed locations. Unfortunately, the way this transpired, if I recall correctly, the last meeting we had where we received this feedback from the council was just before 4th of July holiday. We are effectively a handful of business days later. We don't do the notifications. The city clerk's office does. I would be surprised if they got any notifications out because I didn't have this information myself until yesterday. That being said, I had discussed this with the city solicitor, and it probably makes sense to have those notifications go out. I am not, however, anticipating any significant feedback or objection. As you look through all of these, you'll see that we've, at the council's request, moved them away from residences to commercial properties. So, here we have, this is Columbia Gas Substation and a National Grid check house. I don't anticipate they're going to show up after getting notification. Similarly, on the next one, we've moved it in front of the cemetery. I don't know off the top of my head, but I was told that this is a city-operated cemetery, so presumably the city actually has notice of this one. But anyway, notice can go out. I'm not anticipating any specific resistance to that. Again, on this one, we've moved it to an empty lot right here, where the previous location was down in a much more residentially dense area. So again, now there isn't a butter here, so that person may show up. The notification by law will go to this property. I don't know off the top of my head if it's the same owner or not. So that's one. But as we move here, again, we've now gone in front of a funeral home and the library, whereas the previous location was here, again in a dense residential area. I'm not anticipating a whole lot of feedback from the funeral home. It's probably more of a benefit, to their business than any sort of detriment in terms of looking at an additional utility pole. Similarly, this one has been moved to the initial proposed location for the macro facility from 3 years ago. This is Michael's limousine here. So,
I'm sorry, can you just hold on 1 minute?
Sure.
I'd like to just, as we talked about taking page by page, so I can appreciate
understood.
you trying to explain something, but if we can still just finish up on the first page, if there's any other counselors that have a question on the location of that pole. Councilor Osnall, you were speaking there, you fine? Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to come back to, as we go through the locations, while I understand the attorney's comments that, a business might not have an issue, we should be, notifying people who are abutting. I think we'd run ourselves into trouble if we just try to just say, I'm sure they'll have no problem. So with all due
I think we
respect,
have
we
to.
need to do that. Yeah, legally, I don't want to be in that situation. Thank you.
Any questions on the 01 location? Okay, if you'd like to move on to the, would be 02, I imagine, 20?
actually, it's 2-0 because we had a total of 14 and there were 7 that the council did not have objection to. So this one was the one that we called SC20. This is, you all probably know better than me the location of this. Is there anyone who's not clear on where this is? I think this is...
It's on Washington Street.
So previously, again, we were in this area where you have a residential property here. Specifically, we moved it away from the residential area. Now it's in front of the cemetery. We can bring this down to the height of the existing poles. There are lines on both sides of the street in this area. However, it seems pretty obvious that the better choice would be here rather than here, given the council's concern for moving it away from residential properties. So I think this, again, hits all of the council's objectives in the criteria that were presented to us.
Any questions, councilors? I just had one on that location. That cemetery you speak of, I believe, is a historical cemetery. Is there any things we should be respectful of because of the historical part? Councilor McGinn?
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern, Mr. President. And in this one, Attorney Swiniarski, through you to Attorney Swiniarski, it gets far more industrial as you go down Allen's Lane, which is the street that's perpendicular to
This one
Washington, so diagonally across from Hingston. That would appear to me to be a better alternative. So
Okay.
it would move it perhaps down past the corner of the cemetery on Allen's Lane. And I think that would address the concern raised by Councilor Charis.
So one thing to specifically mention in response to that is that the federal government has preempted local review for small cells with respect to historic properties. It's no longer a criteria that can be used by the municipality to evaluate a specific small cell that is on a utility pole. I don't know the specifics of moving it down the street. Again, that's a whole nother evaluation that we have to do and go back out there again. We're talking about, if you wouldn't mind just looking at the screen so I can point out, we're talking about down this street? And where does the cemetery end? Because it looks like the cemetery is still going. The cemetery ends here. Okay, so I'm not familiar with what is here. But again, what we're talking about is a reevaluation completely. Once again, which is significant work on our part.
And since the concern came from me, I addressed that. I understand what you're saying, but I think at this time in our lives and in our country lives, that a historical cemetery should take trump, let's say, for a lack of better words, the need or the law of what we should be doing. So I would just ask you as the council president to keep in mind of the respect that this council has for the living residents and deceased residents.
Okay.
And
I
I
can
think your
understand that.
company could understand that.
I do
Thank
note
you.
there are utility poles here, 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 completely surrounding this property. This would just be one more. So it's something that should be
I
taken
understand
into
your point, and I
consideration.
think you understand mine, right? Thank you. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Attorney Swiniarski. If I recall the original drawings on this pole, which was at Hingston, that was dramatically higher. I mean, the poles along that stretch of Washington Street are in the vicinity of 38 feet tall, and the specification called for 54 feet 2 inches. So now, moving the pole across the street, you're saying you can comply with the height.
Right.
How could that happen, that you're able to dramatically reduce the height of the pole? Obviously that's beneficial and it's what we asked for, but I'm not clear on how that can happen. Why was it spec'd out at 54 feet in the first place?
Let's see if it was 54. We were using standard poles that we use, so now this will be a custom configuration to make the pole match the height. It may not be the standard that was installed in Peabody whenever these were installed, but it's the standard that we use now.
Mr. President, through you to Mr. Attorney Swiniarski, there was no other pole in all 14 grants that was 54 feet, so it doesn't appear to me that that was a standard height.
I'm going to open the plans right now so we can take a look. Yeah, this one is a 50-foot pole, which is taller. I don't have an answer for you as to why that one was 50 at the time. I can find out. The additional 4 feet.
That's fine. It's more of a point of interest than anything. I mean, what you're saying under the new proposal here is that it would be consistent with the height of the poles in the vicinity, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other councilors on this site? Would you like to continue?
Sure. Moving on to what we have named Peabody SC 21.
That is Lynn Street and, I can't see it. Councilors in the, Council Turco, is that your ward?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to find SC 21 in this small print packet that we have here.
It'll be
It
your
was
fourth
originally
page.
24 Lynn Street. It's in Ward 2.
There you go.
Council McGinn, do you have a question?
Again,
Council.
if Attorney Swiniarski could just kind of take us through what you're proposing here.
The initial proposal was farther down Lynn Street where there is significantly denser residential in this area, and it seemed to us that the primary concern of the council was to move these as far away as possible from residential areas. Here we get a little bit better with a vacant lot. Again, these are utility poles that will match the existing utility poles, so it's not as if you see them from very far away, but we have taken it now such that it's not in anyone's front yard other than a vacant lot, which I think was the best location that would still serve the need of this area.
Councilor Gould?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, excuse me. Just to correct the record, that's a backyard for the house on Trophin Lane. It's number 1 Trophin, has a driveway between it, and that's their backyard. It's not a vacant lot, just for the record. Thank you.
Any other councilors? Councilor McGinn, are you set on that? Just because it is your ward. Okay, we'd like to continue?
Okay, so moving on to SC 22. I think this one is obviously a vast improvement. What we have here is, again, a dense residential area. We've moved it down such that we are now on the abutting the funeral home property and the library. It's true there are some houses across the street, but again, you've got existing utility poles here. Here you can see the shadows running the entire length of the street. This is just adding one more into the existing line that's there. And again, we will match the height on this, so it shouldn't look significantly different than what is there today.
Turco?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I've looked at this one. That's actually a good alternate location, so I appreciate that one.
Yep.
Mr. President.
Again.
Yeah, thank you. Through you to Attorney Swiniarski. I know one of the requests that, and you kind of addressed this in your general comments on the front end, was to try to maximize the use of existing poles. And I know that in your initial submittal, you utilized 1 pole. And when I go down these corridors, I see lots of poles that have telephone wires only on them, and that seems to be what's in common with that pole that you are utilizing. Is that an accurate observation? Is that what makes that pole viable for?
That makes sense to me. I don't know with absolute certainty. I know that the goal when we started running into some resistance in working with PMLP was, of course, to first look to existing poles, such that if we can use them, we certainly would, because it's just much easier, it's much more cost effective. We don't go through this process for it. So I think your explanation makes sense. I don't know for sure if that is the one thing that makes, that tells us if it's an existing Verizon telecommunications pole or not. I'm not completely sure.
It just appears to me that there are, if that is the criteria, that there are a number of other opportunities to use existing poles. And do you have possession of a list that shows all of the Verizon-owned poles in the?
I don't have possession of a list, but if what you're saying is that it appears to you there are some, if you could point them out, I can evaluate them before the next meeting. I don't think such a list exists. The way this works, as I understand it, is that they go out and do field work in the area where the coverage is needed, and the technicians who are doing that work can identify whether there is a pole in the area that is owned by Verizon Telecommunications.
So they must have a list, the people that are doing the field work?
No.
They don't?
I don't think there's a list. I mean, there are utility poles everywhere. I don't think it's a list. I think the poles can be identified in the field. I don't know if they are identified exactly in the manner you described. That seems like it makes sense to me, but I don't know for sure. I think the poles are obviously going to be labeled and badged, but I would highly doubt that anybody has a list of all the poles.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, if you're saying it would be on me as a city councilor to go out there and point to a specific pole and say, I think this one would work?
Well, you mentioned to me that you thought that there were alternatives based on what you saw, so.
I do. I just think somewhere there must be a repository of information as to who owns which poles. But
Stan might know. I'll ask him very quickly.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Give me 1 moment.
If you just please state your name and
Sure.
address.
My name is Stan Yusevich. I'm Verizon Government Affairs Regional Director with offices at 63 High Street in Danvers. To your question, Counselor, there are many poles in Peabody that we own, Verizon solely owns, as well as poles that are owned by Peabody Municipal Light Plant. We are attached to their facilities, and we're attached under an agreement. So you may be referencing communications equipment that is attached to a Peabody Municipal Light Plant pole. And those areas, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. City Solicitor, are defined geographically in the city. So Peabody Municipal Light has a certain percentage or a certain area in which they set all the poles and are sole owners. And we have an area that we set those poles and our owners. And we have reciprocal agreements for attachments with both the power company and other attachees such as Comcast and other carriers. And there was a question that was asked earlier that I think deserves to be a little further explained, and that had to do with cell towers versus these small cells. And cell towers are far more expansive in terms of their signal and how they can capture areas. The small cells that we're talking about and the locations that were proposed here are line of sight, and they're typically between 800 and 1,000 feet in terms of their signal strength. So we use them particularly to cover gaps in coverage or those areas that experience excessive use in certain times, so that people have a smooth handoff, if you will, from one location to another. And that's why you'll see in most of the displayed areas, we're moving down a street, for instance, in a line of sight. And that's why perhaps in some cases we may not be able to go around a corner because we're not going to be able to service that gap area. So bear in mind that these are lines of sights. They're typically, the canisters are 38 inches, I believe, Chris, tall. And again, they're limited in their effectiveness, and it's typically between 800 and 1,000 feet. So I hope that kind of clarifies the difference between a small cell and a cell tower in terms of its expansive view of things. And a lot, as Chris has said earlier, as Attorney Swiniarski had said earlier, has to do with topography. And understanding that the criteria that the council had asked for is to be in line with the existing pole line made a lot of sense to us, and that's what we did. I'm not quite sure why one pole would have been at 52 feet, except that it may have been the standard pole that we set in our set area. But conformity to the pole line is something that made a lot of sense to us. Mr. President, through you to Mr. Yusevich.
Yes,
Thank you,
Councilor.
Mr. Yusevich.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, again, just getting back to the pole ownership thing, I'm clear that there are multiple scenarios.
Yep.
And that I believe that once PMLP is on any pole, there's some level of joint ownership. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that more than likely is accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have at least one pole in South Peabody that we know for fact is your property, and we're utilizing, and it's being the application is to utilize that pole.
Right.
I don't know how did that one get identified?
Typically,
and we're saying there's no other way to identify others. I'm still kind of struggling with that.
well, Councilor, this is easily cleared up. In many communities where we don't have ownership of the poles, such as in geographical areas like Danvers, Splitster Town, as Peabody does, there may be a requirement for us to serve an area that is somehow powered in a different direction from the power line, and under an agreement with Peabody Municipal Light,
we will set a pole that will be solely owned by us. And what that means is typically the power line is not on that pole. So we secure the responsibility for that pole, even though it may be in PMLP's set area. So more than likely, in that instance, you'll find that it's just telecommunications that is on that pole and not PMLP.
In my observations when I go up Washington Street, including Attorney Swiniarski, the poles that you made reference to that in the vicinity of the cemetery, I believe there's nothing but communication wires on those. So that's you're telling me the field crew can somehow definitively say that there's no opportunity there to utilize those existing poles?
Yeah, I don't know how they determine it, but I can tell you that unless a very serious error was made, there is no reason that we would be doing this before you proposing a new pole if we own a pole that's 20 feet away and can use it without any permission needed. I'm very confident in the common sense involved there. I do not know exactly how they determined whether they own the pole or not in that particular area. I can find out, but I don't know right now.
Yeah, if you could provide that information, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. President.
I just had one thought to the attorney. At the next meeting you talked about, would it be a possibility for one of these folks that you talk about who go out and make an analysis if the poll can be utilized, could they be here to just answer some of the questions we have that kind of make the transition smoother? Just because I know a lot of your conversation is that you're saying when these people go out and look at it, you're not understanding exactly how they make their determination, but unless it's a great error, they can't use that. But it'd be helpful if somebody was here who was able to explain that to us, who's actually does that type of work. Would that be possible?
I think so.
Great.
I will see. What might be helpful too is if a member of PMLP would be here, because I think they would do it the exact same way. And I think a member of PMLP could most certainly tell us if they own those poles.
Sure. So if a combination of PMLP and your folks, it'd be great. Thank you. Any other councilors on this poll? No? Let's move forward.
I believe we are now at what we call SC24. So this one is very simply moved across the street. Previously, it was on the property here, which is to the south of the initial proposed location for the first facility that is in litigation right now. So we've moved it back across the street to that facility so that it is not abutting the yard of this home here. Again, in keeping with the request of the council. I know a lot of people who are on the council right now were not present for the discussion in that first application 3 or some years ago, but you know, a big part of that discussion was that this single commercial property is unique, and the majority of the neighborhood is in fact residential, such that this really is, in this area, the only commercial property that I know of. And again, keeping in mind that the coverage areas are determined by a line of sight or the lack of obstruction, such that, you know, going here and being obstructed by a building changes everything. It has to remain relatively close.
Councilor Turco?
Thank you, Mr. President. So yeah, that's, I mean, the former location was the corner of MacArthur Road. This obviously is much better across the street in front of the limo buses located at Michael's Limousine. But being as that I don't live there, I'd like to get the opinion of the residents. And fortunately, I have one. If Mr. Swanson would like to give his quick opinion on that at some point when you do want to open that up. But this is why we need to send out those abutters notices so that I can get that feedback from those residences.
Any other councilors? You'd like to move on?
Yes. This is the site that we call SC30. On this particular site, we're sort of proposing this as the council could take its pick. I think this site largely met most of the criteria anyway that the council had, such that it's not much of a change from the previous to the new proposed. This is not really in a residential area, other than I believe this is a residential property, so that is why we moved it from being across the street from the residential property, and we've put it here, whereas this is obviously commercial. As far as being on the same side of the street as the lines, this particular street has lines on both sides. So again, in general, the initial location I think was pretty good. If the council views this as an improvement, we're happy to do this. Again, we'll also reduce the height to match the height of the poles that are there now. But I think overall we're not talking about a significant difference between the two, being that the initial proposal was pretty good to begin with.
Councilman McGinn.
Thank you. Through you to Attorney Swiniarski. Just want to correct you on a statement you made about poles on both sides. There are no poles on both sides at that location. There are a couple of poles that cross there and go onto private property to service buildings on the other side of the street, but there is no pole line there, so the request remains the same. It would be to get that on the other side of the street.
Okay, so then my question would be, if that is the case, then we're conflicting with two of the criteria, where if we're moving to this side of the street, we're getting on the residential side. And I think the idea was, as you said, we have lines running here. You can see the shadow running across. This is a pole right here. This is a pole here. There's one here. There's one here.
Yeah, the poles you're pointing to are on private property and are outside our jurisdiction. They're servicing. Sure. So they're servicing on the perpendicular into the back of these buildings. What some of the shadows you see there are trees. So the major pole line is on the opposite side of the street, and there is no residential on that side of the street.
I believe this is a residential building.
Which building you point at?
Right here.
No, it's not.
Okay, so
if you could take another look at that.
So the council would prefer us to move it to this side of the street?
The preference, yeah, to I think consistent with the criteria is, and as Mr. Yusevich said a few moments ago, he thought it made perfect sense to try to line these up with the pole line. So in this case, that would be on the opposite side of the street. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other councilors? When you like, you can move on.
Okay, to the last one. This one is a little bit unique in that we have a pretty large commercial property here. So we didn't want to put it on the residential side, but by moving it from this area, we've obscured it from the residences as well as can be done with a large tree that's here, thereby meeting the criteria the best possible way that we can.
Yes, that's my ward, so just looking at the pictures now. And what would the height on that pole be?
So we'll match the height of the existing poles, whatever it is.
Because I know that elevation of that property is much higher than Lowell Street on the, an existing pole line. The only thing is this is subject to development, so I'm not quite sure in the plans that will be submitted if that's going to be a curb cut or impeding on that development being processed. So my only question is, I know there's going to be a proposal coming forward on that piece of property, I think with some sketches. So I really, on that would certainly have to be sent out for the abutters. So that's my only concern, is that whole parcel there, you know.
Well, that abutter already had notification because we haven't changed property. We've just moved down the same property line a small amount.
Yes, but like I just said, that property is being developed, and the proposal that may be coming to us relatively tomorrow could have that location
Okay.
as a driveway.
Okay.
And I certainly don't think you want to put it in a driveway.
Oh, understood. So
Okay,
would
so
the,
I would like to ask that question, you know, a substantial space right there that I think if it's on that side of the street and it needs to be moved 5 feet, 10 feet, I can understand you trying to put it in front of that tree directly across the street.
Yeah.
But again, I can appreciate not being on the same side of the street because of the houses right there. But I do have a couple questions on that.
yeah, well, that makes, I mean, obviously the initial location works for us too. So if if the driveway is in one of those two and we have to move it to the other one, of course that works for us.
Let me ask you a question. Would you be opposed to some of these poles that you're aligning them up directly across the street from a tree, that on the opposite side of the street there was no tree, and it would be an opportunity for you to plant a tree? Would you be in support of that?
I don't know.
As good faith? I mean, it's a tree.
Depends on the tree. I've been asked to plant $40,000 trees before, and in this case, in the context of settling litigation, probably not going to plant a $40,000 tree. If it's a nominal tree, my feeling is that it probably wouldn't be a problem, but I'd have to get back to you on that.
Sure, and I thank you on that, but I don't know who sold you a $40,000 tree, but I'd like to get that commission on that one. So, but I would, again,
I bet this one would cost $40,000 to replace the one that's here now.
I'm not asking you to replace it. I'm
Yeah.
asking you to
I'm just saying
plant
that's
one that would, significantly grow and stuff. And just recently being involved in a project that the developer planted $80,000 worth of trees, a much smaller company than yours, in good faith to develop and have that good location. I do believe that businesses can be good neighbors. So I'm not asking for, that much money of a tree, but again, I would like to get the commission on that nursery. So,
Yeah.
good. We can go on that, maybe that might be an issue. Might be a solution to some things.
Yeah, I would be surprised if that wasn't doable. Obviously, we would need to know where and what type of tree. One thing I wanted to add before we wrap up, one of these is a Verizon-owned pole already, and I have to check which one that is. I believe it is SC30 here, which we were talking about changing the street side, in which case I don't think we have to. And we had included in our package of the petitions just a statement saying we want to have full transparency and sort of disclose this whole thing because it's settlement of a lawsuit, but we don't actually need a grant of location on the one that we own. And if you can just bear with me, I can see if that was SC30. I just don't recall.
It was SC 23.
It was
Attorney
23?
Swiniarski.
Okay. All right then.
Mr. President, through you to Attorney Swiniarski.
Counsel, yes.
What was the point? It is SC 23. What's the point of?
Because you had asked me about moving to the other side of the street.
No, there was no request to do anything with SC 23. We were.
On SC 30, and I was thinking that may have been the existing pole. My mistake, though.
Okay, thank you.
Councilors? Councilor Turco.
I'm not sure the direction of this hearing. I'm all set with Attorney Swiniarski for now, if everybody else is, but I did want to ask Attorney Swiniarski and Attorney Smirzinski the same question. I still like the idea of these poles looking like streetlights. It's done in the city of Boston. It's done in most local communities now. So I'm not quite sure if it's a cost thing for Verizon. I know you said the project, it's more project work. Is it just a money thing, or is it actually, more work to put 2 lights up on top of the pole?
I would bet it's both, and it's not something my client's prepared to offer to settle the litigation at this point.
Okay, that's, so I guess my question is no longer to you then. Attorney Smirzinski, could I ask you a quick question in that regard? Thank you, Attorney Smirzinski. You have issue with asking the judge in the settlement to make these streetlights, these poles look like streetlights, or do you think that would be detrimental to this lawsuit in any way to make these more presentable to the city of Peabody? Apparently, Attorney Swiniarski does, but I just want to know, can we continue to ask for that? Because I don't really see it as a big deal. I see it as beneficial to the residents to do that.
The answer is no. And the reason why is the judge is interested in either having a settlement reported to him, the terms of which he doesn't participate in, that we work out ourselves, or either go into trial or having a renewed motion for summary judgment on the Michaels Limousine case. That's all he's interested in. So he's non-participatory in the minutia of any settlement that we work out with Verizon.
Okay, I'm glad. With that then, so if we approve these polls, then can we ask you as our city solicitor to negotiate with Mr. Yusevich and Mr. Swiniarski to actually be somewhat accommodating to the city of Peabody in that respect, similar to Ed just gave up his $40,000 tree for a much cheaper one. So if we could maybe look at these light poles a little bit more thoroughly, and again, that's for you to negotiate with him, but I'm asking you if you could, for the benefit of the residents that are near these poles. And with that, I'll continue to ask questions to Mr. Swanson when I have the ability to about those poles, but thank you.
Okay, the answer to the question is I can continue to ask. I heard what I believe was their current position, and that answer was in the negative, that they weren't interested in doing any type of design other than the one that they're proposing. But I can continue to ask.
Thank you. So a council would have the ability to just vote no if that's the case. But okay, thank you.
Any other councilors? Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I definitely appreciate this feedback from the petitioners. And as was pointed out, it was a difficult time with the holidays and everything. But that still being the case, we got this just tonight, and I think we needed an opportunity to digest it a bit more, as Councilor Turco said, interact with our constituents on some of these proposed changes and so forth. So, and of course, we have the abutter issue that you seem to be in agreement with. That being the case, my suggestion would be that and I'd like to make a motion to recess this public hearing to the August 23rd meeting. So moved.
Councilor.
I had a question for Attorney Swiniarski.
Yeah, if we could just make sure we go through all the questions before we address the motion, that would be okay?
That's fine.
Because I had
Thank
one
you.
question myself.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. It was mentioned a summary judgment was submitted on Michael's Limousine. Was that in like September 2017, maybe? Yeah, I think so. Could you tell me why a summary judgment wasn't submitted for the Coolidge Ave submission? Because, let me just finish my question, if you could. And because the two are still active, obviously, we've referenced them several times this evening. So there was no summary judgment on Coolidge. I was wondering why that was, and I also would like to know that if, for some reason, we're unable to come to an agreement, given the path we're going down right now, because I also know that PMLP is involved with, making this happen as well. If, for some reason, the path we're going down now doesn't work out, is Coolidge Ave still, is your company still interested in the Coolidge Ave proposition as an offer to settle the two cases if what we're doing now doesn't work out? Is Coolidge Ave still on the table for you folks?
Yep, I think the answer to both questions is intertwined. I don't know if we're still interested in Coolidge Ave, and I'll explain why, and that is also the reason why there was not a motion for summary judgment on that case, I believe. The city owns Coolidge Ave, so the court cannot compel the city through the action that we filed in the land court to lease the property to us for development. These proceedings were filed as appeals of permit denials, but that doesn't affect the property right. Now, granted, the city council did vote to accept an RFP, and certainly there could be a different cause of action there. I have no idea if my client's interested in pursuing that right now, but in short, the answer that I'm giving you is, if they're interested from an operational standpoint in still utilizing that, the very, very first step would be the city signing a lease.
And I guess since it's both still open, and to me that indicates you still are, it's still on the table, and that you are still interested in the Coolidge location, Coolidge Ave location, just by simply that the lawsuit is still open and we're referencing it and we're trying to settle it. So to me, it's still an option. I can't see it any other way. And I do understand it is on public land. It was offered to you when an RFP went on. I get all that. As I'm sure you recall, I've been here since the first time you entered the auditorium on this subject. So I remember it all pretty well. So it's still open. It's still a possibility for settlement if all this doesn't work out, is my understanding.
There's always a possibility. It's just there's a lot of specifics that have to come together there. Obviously, the big one, as I mentioned, being if the city's still open to it being an option, because it was presented to us as an option and then the rug was pulled out from under us as an option. So there's a lot involved there to make that a viable option, but who knows? If that is something the city's interested in, I can take it back to my client.
Thank you. So it is still an option, and it is open. And that's good to hear, because the Michael's limousine area, as you've also reiterated yourself, you understand that it's a neighborhood, and we adamantly oppose it. And I think that we stood on pretty solid ground when we did oppose it the first time. And you're right. What happened next, I agree that the offer of Coolidge did occur the way that you've just described it. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that. So we do have options. I appreciate all the work that everyone has done in trying to resolve this in the manner that we have this evening, and all the work that's been put in. But I'm pleased to know that we do have other options other than it's either this or Michael's limousine, because that, to me, is clearly not the case. So thank you very much.
Okay. Council Melville.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just have a request. Before it sounds like we're going to move it to our next meeting. Prior to that next meeting, can we be apprised of all the emails, back and forth correspondence, whatever is privileged, even so that we can understand the entire process and all those that are involved in it? I think it's just helpful. One thing is a counselor that's coming on, and a lot of this occurred before I got here, reading the previous executive sessions, along with the correspondence back and forth, has been enlightening for me as a counselor, and I think it would be helpful for me to make a decision going forward on where we go with this. So that's just kind of the background. I'd like to just make sure I get all the correspondence with regards to, I understand there's a lot going back and forth with multiple government agencies and offers and stipulations, and I just want to make sure I'm aware of that before we go in, especially during pending litigation. Thank you.
Certainly, obviously, with the understanding of the open meeting law, providing the emails and correspondence back and forth, absolutely, I would support that, but as long as it doesn't violate the open meeting law, as you. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I know everybody wants to move on with this, but we have two residents here that took the time to come, and I'm not quite sure that they'll be here or able to be here at the next hearing. So while this is still an open to the public, I would like to give those two gentlemen the opportunity, since they sat through this, to speak if they would like.
And I'll certainly hold my comments until the residents are allowed to speak. Yep. If the residents would like to speak, if no objections with the council, thank you. Just please come and state your name and address. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you want a copy of what I put up on the screen? Yeah. I don't need this yet.
Okay.
I'll wait for it to be submitted. Look in the John Swanson, 9 Welcome Street, Peabody. So, as you guys move forward, I appreciate all the efforts that you've been putting forward since July of 2014. Appreciate it. Appreciate the city solicitor has been doing for us as a city. I do want to, through the council, back to the attorney, latch onto something that Councilor Manning Martin said. When they eventually put in for the application for Michael's Limousines, they put a heat map together where they were looking for coverage. That heat map coverage was there because of their Wynoma cell wasn't able to get through the ridges that are along Overlook Drive and whatnot. Now, they're putting small cells across the city. I am in favor of small cells. In this case, I think it should be controlled. I would like you to follow up and ask for the history on this, maybe back from what was originally presented, so that you can compare this coverage from these 14 small cells to what possibly could be just 5, so you can deal with one ward, one area at a time, and come up with a better plan for the city over the time. So again, I don't believe, with my knowledge of this technology, that a 60-foot cell tower was going to cover the entire city as these cells. So I think there's a little bit of sneaking some stuff in here. I'll be frank with you guys. So again, I'd ask that your heat maps be presented again to the councils who have changed. Make sure that what you're presenting here lines up with your original proposal. Oh, my bad. My bad. Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you. So, are you clear with what I'm asking?
Mr. President, I'll repeat for...
Turco, I think. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll repeat for Attorney Smozinski and Attorney Swiniarski. So, the request from the resident to both attorneys was that the original heat map that was provided to dictate which coverage was needed in the area of Michael's Limousine be provided to, in the case of these 14 poles, to indicate that it's the same area that needs to be covered. I guess the resident Mr. Swanson, has some question as to whether these additional poles in the western part of Peabody are actually needed to cover the original request by Verizon regarding Michael's Limousine. I'm just repeating what the resident said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. That's exactly my point. I apologize if I'm... Next, I just want to make sure that you're all clear. As the attorney has said, he keeps using the word utility pole. I want to make sure you're clear that these are not going to be wooden poles. They'll be, you can ask him directly, will there be other utilities? Will be cables be placed to these? These will be new structures, as you can see in these drawings. Make sure that it's clear that you understand, and the residents understand, these are not going to be new wooden poles that are sunken in. There's going to be construction, footing set, and aluminum structures put in, and then the cell tower, the small cells put in there. Again, I want to make sure that there's clarity on this, that you understand exactly what's going on as these are being proposed to you, and that again, there's no mince words here. So again, just for clarity, that's what I'm asking you guys to understand.
Thank you. Please give your name and address for the record.
The name is Russell Donovan, 12 Quail Road, South Peabody. I have 2 points here, and I'd like to ask the attorney from Verizon. He talked about a vacant lot. My first question is, is there going to be land taking from private property? Are any of these poles going to be put on private property? Because you said there was a vacant lot.
Mr. Donovan, I think he was saying, reference to where the pole was in front of a vacant lot, but if you like, he can explain himself too, but I believe that's what he was trying to say, that the lot behind the pole was vacant, which is now, as Councilor Gould pointed out, is not a vacant lot, but actually a backyard to a resident.
That is correct. We were using reference points, and the property that this was abutting, we considered to be a vacant lot, although, as we've learned tonight, is somebody's backyard. However, the pole is not going on private property. It's going on the public way, which is the reason we have submitted a petition for grant of location. The city does not have the power to grant a location on private property. It is only on the public right-of-way.
You can continue, Mr. Donovan.
Thank you. The other point I want to make is because Peabody Municipal Light Plant will not allow these devices on Peabody Municipal Light poles, power poles, the City Council and the city is going through extensive negotiations because our light plant will not allow the use of their poles. They're going to provide power to these devices, so they will be, Verizon Wireless will be a customer of theirs, but not a good customer because they won't let them use our poles. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilors? Councilor McGinn? Councilor, I just want to ask one question, so before you ask for...
This is a question.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. President, to Attorney Swiniarski, if you I think you heard Mr. Swanson's comment about the material of the poles, and I know I believe there was some confusion around this previously. I want to make sure that there's clarity on that. What I saw in the notes is that these are all wooden poles. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Yeah, I couldn't quite hear the comments, but I agree there was some confusion. These are wood utility poles.
So similar in nature to the poles that are
yes,
commonly seen along city streets today.
In better condition, but yes, wood poles.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Sasslaw. Excuse me, Sasslaw.
Thank you. I, like Council Manning, will not be voting on this, my understanding, but the only comment I had is that sometimes, I don't know if it was formally requested, but I know everyone wants to move this forward. I do feel the PMLP plant manager, general manager, Mr. Troyer, might want to be here at the next hearing because, so that all questions that arise can be answered, because they're a piece of it. They're referenced many times by many attorneys, by councils, so I just think it would be appropriate to ask for his presence here so that to move the process along. Thank you.
Certainly think that would be a wise decision. Again, as I expressed earlier, that I would like some of his technical people there, and then he suggested the PMLP also, and then we'll certainly request, we cannot, make, but we certainly can ask the manager to come. Any other councilors with questions? The only question I did have, and Council McGinn just brought it up, and I want to be clear. So earlier you said that they weren't going to be like the telephone poles, but now you just said they are going to be wooden poles similar to, but better condition than the telephone poles, the utility poles we have now. So they're not metal poles, they are wooden poles that you would see with any other kind of utility lines.
Yes, correct. I don't recall ever saying that they
Maybe
wouldn't
I
be.
took it, misunderstood what you're saying,
Yeah,
but I just wanted to be clear. And all these poles, the heights were, if I remember correctly, going through the packet, all got reduced if they were higher than the existing poles. Those poles got reduced to the existing height of poles.
On the 7 that the council was concerned with in the residential areas, we did have 7 that the council had said they were okay with because they're not anywhere near residential areas,
So the height on those poles would be?
as shown in the plans. They vary a little bit.
Councilors, can someone help me out? Do anyone know that, before going through the plans, the height of those poles would be?
They vary. They were around 40 feet, and the antenna that goes on top is a 38-inch antenna.
They're not a 60-foot pole
They are
that
not.
I heard talked about before, so majority of them is 40. Councilman McGinn, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. To address the question, and I had brought this up with Attorney Swiniarski earlier this evening, the pole on Hingston Street that I was asking about, or at the corner of Hingston Street that was earlier proposed, was going to be the tallest. That was 54 feet 2 inches. Everything else was less than that. There was another tall one, 49 feet at 24 Lynn Street. But many of these others are closer to the range of what we would expect to see of a typical utility pole, although on the high side, because the most common height, as I've come to understand, is in the area of 38 feet. And a lot of these are, and I'm talking now, when I talk height, I'm talking based on the submitted specifications. I'm talking to the top of the antenna because that's what people are going to see. So I'm not talking about the pole itself. I'm talking about the built-out structure to the top of the antenna. Those ranged from the shortest one, Mr. President, at actually up on Essex Green, that was 34 feet 2 inches. And again, to the tallest one, which I mentioned, which was 54 feet 2 inches, and there are a number of variations in between. So if you'd like, I can give you all the heights, but...
And again, I lied, I only have one question. And then imagine these poles that, if and when they get approved, you will categorize them as Verizon poles and add that list that didn't exist. You would now start keeping that just in case any other further questions we have a designating of poles. I mean, I can't believe your company doesn't know where their poles are, because I don't know if you're paying a excise tax, or not excise, a tax on the poles, but just on a inventory reason, I can't imagine you don't know where your poles are. So,
But that's not really a fair characterization of what I said. I said there isn't a list. As Stan explained, there are areas which the poles are ours, but it's not a list of poles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. It's that the poles in this area are owned by Verizon Telecommunications. The poles in this area are owned by PMLP, and there are some outliers there, but I don't think there's just a list of the poles. But yes, they do know whose poles are whose, and these will be different, obviously, because these are Verizon Wireless facilities now. So yes, we will, of course, have a list of these poles.
okay, maybe that's where I went wrong on the first question I had back. When you say these poles will be different.
They're going to have wireless communications facilities on them.
Okay, but structurally wise, they're not going to be different.
No, yeah.
Okay, so they'd be different because I keep on forgetting, you're talking Verizon, two different companies here.
Yes. Right.
Okay, so the public understands when we talk about Verizon Cell, it's different than Verizon Teller and
Telecommunications and wireless are different.
you guys don't get along, is that it?
I think we get along.
Okay.
Stan's here. We've been very cordial.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. So, okay, now I understand why you may not have that list, is because it's two different.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other councilors? Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. So my motion to recess to August 23rd is still on the floor, I believe.
That is the motion. Roll call?
Councilors O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Charest.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along. Hearing 4B. I think this is a continuing?
Yes,
Counselor?
Counsel, a motion to receive late communication from Attorney Kelty, asking to continue this until meeting on September 13th, 2018. That's a late communications motion to receive.
You heard the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Four C.
Yes, Council President, motion to receive late communication from the petitioner asking for a continuance of the special permit hearing. So move.
I've been instructed that we need to open the hearing.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's go.
Clerk, will you read the announcement?
Notice is hereby given that the City Council of the City of Peabody, acting as a special permit granting authority, will conduct a public hearing on Thursday evening, July 12th, at 7:30 p.m. in the Frank L. Wigan Auditorium, City Hall, 24 Lowell Street, Peabody, Mass., on the application of Francisco Burgo, 11 Ocean Ave, Salem, Mass., for a special permit seeking to allow a contractor's yard with shed and portable potty at 25 Farm Ave, Peabody, Mass., as filed in accordance with Sections 4.2.5, 6.1, and 15.7 of the Peabody zoning ordinance. Peabody City Council, Council President Edward Charest.
Councilor Sasslaw, you want to take this one?
Yes, yeah, a motion to receive late communication for petitioner. So move.
Heard the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Based upon the communication, motion to continue special permit hearing until the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Peabody City Council, or at the petitioner's request.
Heard the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Move to reports of committee. Municipal Safety. Councilor Sasslaw, please.
Thank you. We have a meeting tonight of the Municipal Safety Committee. In attendance were on the committee, Council Gould, Council Manning Martin, Council Melville, Council Turco. In addition, we're joined by Council O'Neill and Council McGinn and Council Rosengren and Council Charest. We had 3 items on the agenda tonight. The first item was proposed ordinance change for Section 19-36 for safety zones. This is basically in regards to, we did not have anything on the books for a vehicle that does not follow the direction of a police officer. So we have, on the recommendation of Sergeant Harkins, we're proposing the new zoning ordinance with the major change being that there is now a violation schedule. First offense of $50 in a calendar year, second offense $100 in a calendar year, third and subsequent offense in a calendar year $150. This is primarily due to the issue of at the Higgins Middle School drop-off. It happens, unfortunately, that cars don't follow the rules of the road, and sometimes they do cut. They go out of order, and so it's a safety issue, and the police, once again, looking for just some teeth to enforce this. And that was a vote of 5-0 for recommendation by the subcommittee. So move.
Need to move to advertise?
Propose to advertise and adopt as advertised.
You heard the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Second item on the agenda tonight, we received a letter from a resident from 394 Lowell Street regarding posted speed limits. There was a concern that going west past Sioux Chang's, when people come out of that little kind of hairpin turn, they seem to accelerate. The residents expressed concerns for safety, both the resident of 394 Lowell Street and 395 Lowell Street. Once again, Sergeant Harkins explained that this road was exempt from the 25-mile-per-hour zone that was just recently passed on a state level due to the fact that it was a Mass DOT study done on this road, and if we were to undertake a new study, it would be from Lowell Street, starting in downtown Peabody, all the way to the Linfield line. And the concern of the police department was that sometimes, if they do a study, it might in turn end up with the speed limit going up, which is the last thing that we want to happen. So the speed limit is 40 miles per hour on this road. After much input by many fellow councilors, it was agreed upon that Sergeant Hawkins is going to speak to the traffic division, and he will ask for greater patrol of this area. And also it was requested that the speed monitoring trailer that they have that's mobile, if they could put that out in the general vicinity of the area in question to help bring the traffic speed limit down. So no motion, just information. Last item on the agenda was a request for some streets changing directions on the regarding the streets surrounding 3, 5, and 7 Central Street. Attorney Kelty presented us with some information regarding the request regarding Pound Lane, North Central Street, and he took into consideration the request made by the councilors. We did not move on this. He's agreed to come back with additional maps actually showing the requested signs so the councilors could see, whether it be no turn on, right turn only, even some information regarding painting on the roadway. And also the request was made that any changes in this roadway conditions would not be done until after the properties were developed, so not before. He agreed to that, and he agreed to put this off until September and come back with some new and better maps that indicated where the various street signs that were requested by council members. And that was the gist of our meeting tonight.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor McGinn, Legal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legal Affairs Committee met earlier this evening. Present at the meeting were members Councilor Gould, Councilor O'Neill, and filling in for absent members were Councilor Rosignol and Councilor Turco. There was also Councilor Sharris, Councilor Saslaw, Councilor Manning Martin, and Councilor Melville also attended the meeting. We had one item on the agenda, which was a request by Peter Carubis of 2 Gilmore Terrace to purchase city-owned land, map 73, lot 207. There was some debate on this issue, and after the debate, there was a motion made by Councilor O'Neill to deny the request by Peter Ruby 2 Gilmore Terrace to purchase city-owned land, map 73, lot 207, and so moved.
Heard the motion. Roll call, please.
Mr. President, so this was a motion to deny, so a yes vote is to deny.
Councilors O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Saslaw,
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
Charest.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And that was it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Finance Committee was presented by Councilor Manny Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did sit in as Chair of Finance this evening for Councilor Gravel, who was unavailable this evening. And we had a couple of items that we discussed. One being a municipal vote authorizing reimbursement obligations in association with Mass Development Brownfield Assessment Recoverable Grant Resolution in support of the site assessment of 24 Collis Street. And this had to do with improvements on the Riverwalk and advancements in that area. And a motion was made by Councilor Gould for municipal vote regarding reimbursement obligations, resolution in support of site assessment of 24 Collis Street, Peabody, Mass, as written. So moved.
Heard the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Roll call, please.
Councilors O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
Charest.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you very much. And we also had a little cleanup from a previous Finance Committee meeting, whereas the Community Development Department provided us additional information with respect to a request for transfer from the Community Preservation Act from its housing line item to its Community Development Housing Production Plan in the amount of $19,600. And that motion to transfer said funds was made by Councilor McGinn. And the line item would be 270-0000-33023, again in the amount of $19,600, to line item 270-01811-58564-2018-0318, again for $19,600, again made by Councilor McGinn. So moved.
For the motion, roll call, please.
Councilors O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
Charest.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And that is report of committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There's a report out on Committee of the Whole. Councilors O'Neill, McGinn, Gould, Sasslaw, Manny Martin, Turco, Melville, and myself was present. We had a presentation of this by the City Community Preservation Committee. They went over numerous projects that they had done in the years past. They expressed the desire for programs to be brought to them for their consideration, especially in the housing market, affordable housing. So it was very enlightening, a lot of information for us to go over and recognize their good work. So, and it was expressed that anyone who had any questions on issues of preservation should seek out Mr. Schultz for any questions they may have. I would encourage people to do that. He has a wealth of information. That was it on that, and we'll go on motions and resolutions. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a co-motion tonight with Councilor Gould to request PMLP to evaluate installation of a light pole near 23 Pinewood Road. So moved.
Motion, all in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
No further motions tonight. Thanks.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Suspension of the rules, move to receive item 7A and refer to finance. So moved.
Hear the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. On suspension of the rules, move to receive item 8G and refer to finance. So moved.
You heard the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. No further motions.
Councilor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a co-motion with Councilor Matsoulis to have a tree trimmed across the street from 15 Roland Road. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Also, I'd like to make a co-motion with you, Mr. President. A resident on King Street has brought it to my attention that there's a cupola that belonged to the old J.B. Thomas Hospital that is sitting on top of the maintenance shed, and he thinks there's some historic value. So I'd like to see if the Historical Society can evaluate its value and potentially save it. So moved.
So move. I would also reach out to the owners of the property who's been very...
Would you do that, Mr. President?
I certainly will. Who's very open to recycle, reuse any of the materials that's been there, including a granite bench that just can't seem to find any residents locally who that belonged to. It was their father. So they're very much open to anything like that that could be salvaged for the residents here.
So moved. Thank you.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Council Gould.
Yes, a motion to receive item 8C.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to receive under suspension rules item 8F.
8F, you heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to receive item 8I.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to receive item 8K and send it to Industrial and Community Development Subcommittee to discuss at a later date.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to receive item 9A, block party request, 27 Benevento Circle, approve all papers being in order.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
And also, I'd like to make a motion that the Department of Public Services replace the sidewalk at 47 Gooddale Street that's in disrepair, and also add a berm so that it won't be destroyed again. So move.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Would you like to take the other block party?
Yes. 9A, motion to approve block party request at Buttonwood Lane between Rodding Road and Fitz Road, all papers being in order.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
That's it. Thank you, Council President.
Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to give a report out on the long drive competition for the City Council's Drug Education and Awareness Committee. We had a great event, and it was very successful. I think actually there's still money coming in, and I think we raised anywhere from $5,500 to $6,000 on the event. So it was very successful. We had a lot of fun.
Good job, Councilor.
Thank you, thank you. And I want to thank my colleagues on the council, especially Dave Gravel and Tom Gould, for their very generous sponsorships from Gravehawk and from Treadwells. I also wanted to thank Councilor Ryan Melville and his wife Mariana, who scooped ice cream the whole time. He did an excellent job, Tom. So if you're looking for any extra help this summer, he's very good at it.
Just look at him. I'm nervous.
And he also hit a bomb of, I think, what I have it down here, 258-yard bomb into the wind in the rain. So he actually came in pretty close. He did not win, but he certainly was right up there. And so I thank you very much, Tom, for your donation. It was very generous. And I'd also like to thank Councilor Sasslaw and McGinn for stopping by, and Peter Cronin and his staff at the Meadow. They did a wonderful job. My brother John for lining the field. He puts the laser lines down and marked the field so we could measure the drive's distance, so he was very helpful. And I also want to put a shout out to, again, extremely generous sponsors for this event, which is why we raised so much money. Planet Aid, Cuisine 7 LLC, Peabody Police Department, Wellness Connection of Mass, 795 Jubilee Drive LLC, Gallo Nero Restaurant, Thrift Co. Printing, Attorney Jack Kelty, Metro Bowl through the Spare Time Tavern, and the winners were at 285 yards for the men was Joe Masakowski. And again, it was cold that day, it was raining, and it was windy, and he had a blast of 285 yards. And the seniors division was Johnny Boudreau, 236 yards, and for the women, it was Jacqueline Corvo at 194 yards. So that is a report out on the long drive competition. So now we have a good little balance in there, so we'll be meeting soon to talk about where those monies should go, so now that we can make some donations. So again, I thank you all very much for your help and support on that. And I'd like to make a motion to set up a Human Services Committee meeting. I know Councilor Turco is going to refer something to it. I'll let him address that. But also to Councilor O'Neill, you had referred a matter before to the Human Services, and it was, and I forgot about it because I didn't know where to get an expert to speak on it. So maybe if you could help me set that up. It was the, what kind of animal?
Coyote.
Coyotes, and I think there's some other sort of big cat or something that's been showing up in areas.
I can help you out with that because the coyotes have been a problem throughout the city, and anywhere there's people. But yeah, we can get someone to come and kind of give some basic information.
Excellent.
Hopefully.
All right, great. I'll touch base with you on that, and we can you can help me set that up because I didn't know where to begin with that one. So I will be reaching out to set up a Human Services Subcommittee. And lastly, I would like to respectfully request Community Development Director Kurt Bellavance to give us an update on the Crown and Shield issue that I think that we were supposed to, that he gave a presentation on the Crown and Shield. I think May 31st was the deadline that there was supposed to be a purchase. So I am getting a lot of calls from residents at Crown and Shield as to the status of the sale of that building. So I would respectfully request a motion to either have Kurt Bellavance either fill us in a memo, or if he'd like to come and address the council, if he could just let me know. So moved.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you. And given tonight's Verizon cell tower issue, and the fact that it's now going into its third hearing, and we're down to 6 councilors that can vote, and it requires 6 votes, 6 positive votes, I would suggest that we do look into the Mullen Rule, which I spoke to Tim this week to check to see if I could, because I had missed a part of going to 3 meetings, I missed the first one. So if you miss a portion of the public hearing, you can't vote. You can participate, but you can't vote. Unless the council votes in the Mullen Rule, and this has to do with the open meeting law. So we may want to explore voting in the Mullen Rule, which just simply means that if the council votes to use the Mullen Law, then councilors that miss hearings can review the tape or the minutes, and now it's pretty easy with YouTube, and PAT covers everything. The missing councilors can view the meeting and then write an affidavit or a letter indicating that they've done that, and then the mayor approves the Mullen Rule, and then we will all be able to catch up and vote, because this petition is going to be in trouble if one more drops out. So we won't have the 6 votes. So I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the Mullen Rule. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Councilman McGinn.
Yeah, can we have, I mean, so there's a motion to adopt the Mullen Rule in general, or on a
yes,
specific
it would
to this
be in general.
particular
It would be
hearing?
in general, because then in the future, should this happen again, because if I think, and Tim's not here, but we can touch base with him. I think the way it works is once we take the vote on the Mullen Rule, it goes to the mayor to approve, and then once he approves it, this council can enact that at any time because it's been approved by both the council and the mayor. So should we run into this situation again, we'll be able to just catch up and people won't be left out of the vote, and that's it.
Yeah, so while I appreciate the quick overview of the Mullen Rule, I don't feel comfortable that I know enough about the details of the Mullen Rule to support that motion tonight. So I unfortunately won't be supporting that. Councilor Manning Martin, thank you.
Okay, if I just may, and that's fine, because the next meeting, he's scheduled to come at the next meeting, which is at the end of August, and all 6 members that can vote have to come, and it's summer, and I suspect there's, good luck getting 6, and you lose one more, and I don't know where we would be. So maybe the council president, there's a motion on the floor. I'm just simply trying to not trip this up again, and Lord knows we end up with a 3rd lawsuit with this guy because with this Verizon, because we don't have enough people to vote after he's in a hearing for, 3 times.
Councilor Melville.
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, I agree in theory where Councilman Manning Martin's coming from. I think it's I never knew until tonight that this was the case. And that was actually one of my motions was going to be about open meeting law. However, I've just heard of the Mullen. I don't know the implications if we've already started an open hearing, if we can go, if that's retroactive. And I couldn't agree more with where Councilman Manning Martin's coming from on this, because it is hamstringing us. I would just, before we adopt, I'd just like to see a definition of what we're discussing before we adopt it, and how would it impact whatever is currently before the council. We just continued a couple of other special permit hearings, and what is the impact there? I'm just not prepared on this because it's the first time I've ever come across it. I just heard of the term tonight. I'm actually Googling it as we speak. So would you be amenable to getting that information back through you, Mr. President, to Councilor Manning Martin, and we can discuss? I'm not sure if it would even impact them. That's the only reason I bring it up.
Yeah, and I would say usually no problem, Councilor, but it's not going to be helpful to us in August if there's not 6 people here. So that's really the only thing I can come up with to try and get voting members here. So we'll just put it to vote. I won't take it personally. I'm really just trying to keep things running smoothly. So let's just put it to vote, and that'd be fine.
There's a couple of councilors that would like to speak on, Councilor Manning. Councilor Turco.
Thank you. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I also agree. It's a great idea, Councilor Manning Martin. It's just I don't know the details of that Mullen Rule and what there may be a technicality in there that I don't know about. So my point is there another way we can do this? I was kind of hoping that we had maybe opened a new public hearing since these telephone poles had changed, and I know that we already voted on the item, but is there a way that we could rescind that item for 4A instead of a continuance to actually open it as a brand-new public hearing in August with the new telephone pole locations in that sense, so that all councilors can participate? Just a thought, and if Councilor McGinn shaking his head, so I'm going to ask him directly if that can be done.
Councilor McGinn.
I believe the answer is no. Without the consent of the applicant, we would need the applicant to withdraw and reapply, and then we could open a new public hearing. But at this point, we have a public hearing in process that's been recessed.
Thank you.
Any other councilors? Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would echo the other council's comments. I like the originality from Councilor Manning Martin's motion. I just don't feel competent to vote in favor of it, so I'm going to vote no.
My only comment and question is that Councilor Manning Martin, I think I understand what you're trying to do, but you say 6. I think we still have 7 councilors, because Councilor Rosenau was here.
But he missed the rest of the public hearing that he missed, so you're down to 6.
Okay. Thank you. And again, I'm not sure of the impact on this also. Hope and pray maybe the 25th comes along and the petitioners is not ready as yet to come forward, and may have to have a meeting after that we have the 25th, that we could discuss this, and certainly look for that information that you talk about and what's the impact on it. So that is of course, of action that could happen. We could have one more meeting before that. Certainly would have no problem looking into getting information from our city solicitor about the impact it would have on that. And in a case, I'm wondering if this is, if we adopted the Mullen Rule now, could we do that on this particular case? Because this hearing started with that, and it'd be almost, I don't want, for a lack of a better word, self-serving to us at that point.
And I understand, and I benefit from having this conversation and ask with the very issues that you're bringing up with Tim, and that's what I said. I asked Tim if we can implement it, and he said, yes, you can, but we wouldn't be able to do it before tonight because it needed to have been approved by the mayor. So we will be able to get it approved by the end of August. But I've got the benefit of having that conversation with Tim. He's the guru. You guys don't have the benefit of that. I'm simply relaying to you what I know from learning from him from making the same inquiries. So we can just put it to vote if everybody's all set.
Anyone else set? Anyone would like to speak? Roll call, please.
O'Neill, Councilors O'Neill,
No.
McGinn,
No.
Gould,
No.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
No.
Melville,
No.
Charest.
No.
1, 2, 3. I think it carried. Motion carries. Fails.
Councilor Manning Martin, do you have anything else?
No, that was it. Thank you very
Thank
much.
You're welcome. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to receive and approve all papers being in order, a late communication for a block party at Murphy Road and Bartholomew Street.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to receive a late communication from His Honor the Mayor regarding the appeal of the fine at 143 Linfield Street, the L Fine Building.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Mr. President, as Councilor Manning had previously mentioned, I do want to refer the issue of rats and rodents. I can only speak specifically to my ward, but the issue has gotten worse. And, you know, I know Sharon Cameron from the Health Department is actually on top of this, and she's doing a lot of work with it. But I've just seen other cities go through this same process, and the problem just doesn't go away by itself. And all the ordinance changes and everything else that we could do, it'll help with the problem, but it's not going to alleviate the problem. And I just recently saw the city of Revere spend hundreds of thousands of dollars toward this issue to try to remedy it. There's some good ideas from other cities and towns, and I'd just really like to discuss how we could move this further rather than making ordinance changes. Maybe they work in conjunction with each other, but I mean, recently, 2 days ago, I was called to Emerson Avenue. There was a live rat trapped in the middle of Emerson Avenue. Called the police department. They don't deal with live rodents. There was no animal control officer on site. Called DPW. They don't deal with live animals. It was the resident and I to dispose of this live rat. And the question is, who do residents go to? I mean, this problem, it's getting worse rather than better, and I'm sure other councils can attest to this. And if it was any of our own homes, we would be irate and we would be on top of this, and I think that we should really move on this in some facet. So with that, I'd like to refer that to Councilor Manning Martin's Human Services Committee.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any? Councilor Gould.
Councilor Turco, as always, you're right on it. Keep up the good work. It is a problem, and we need to resolve it. We need to we need to spend some money on it. And thank you for doing that. Councilor Manning, thank you for helping with that.
And I would say, Councilor Turco, we just spoke the other night. My ward is infected, and it seems to go from neighborhood to neighborhood. But one thing I have to stress, each neighborhood, each neighbor, everybody has to do their part in setting traps or doing what they need to do with bird feeders and dog waste and garbage and trash. And we had a great presentation here to tell us, but again, I have to stress, I just dealt with a neighbor yesterday with a very large population of these rats, and she and her husband is doing everything they should be doing, and they're catching multiple ones a day. But the neighbors have to participate, and it's one of these things that you can't be embarrassed that it's going on and you're catching them. You have to talk to your neighbors. You have to incorporate them into the resolution of this, because you're just fighting a battle if you're doing it by yourself. So I certainly support whatever, Councilor Turco, you want to do on this, but it's a community effort. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President, and certainly Ward 2 has its fair share of this problem as well. I just want to reinforce the point you made very well, but just focusing on the single biggest thing that people can do. Everybody does need to do their part, but covering their trash barrels tightly. We heard that resoundingly clear from the health department that is the single biggest attractor, and we need to change some behavior out there, because there are still, as you drive around the city, we see a lot of overflowing trash cans, and that is the #1 attractor. So if people could just be more aware of that and modify their behavior, that would help. It's certainly not going to solve the problem, and as Councilor Turco says, we need to look at this more comprehensively. I applaud that. But as you said, Mr. President, everybody needs to do their part, because if they're not, the problem's never going to get solved. Thank you.
Councilor Turco.
Thank you. And this is the last statement I'll make, it just because Councilor McGinn had mentioned covered trash receptacles, and I'll bring it up during the subcommittee. But yes, we also need to lead by example in the city, and to get pictures of the trash barrels at the trails and different parks that are overflowing, and uncovered barrels. It's just another issue that we need to take the lead on our end, and I do have those pictures that I will bring to the subcommittee of several city-owned properties with the same issue. So again, let's lead by example, and then we could move this issue, forward to the residents also. But on that motion.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Also, with the co-motion with Councilor Gould, who is chair of the Industrial Community Development Division, both of us have received emails from John Swanson, who is here tonight, who also happens to work for Crown Castle, which installs these DAS antennas, and he would like to come before Industrial and Community Development with some people from Crown Castle to better educate us on what we're looking at as a city and as a council over the upcoming years, and some of the issues we may face, and some of the ways that they've dealt with those in other communities. And I just thought it would be good to get that presentation before us.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Gould.
Mr. Swanson, are you okay sometime in September if we pulled that together as a subcommittee? Okay, we'll have to get back to you on that, but thank you. Thank you, Councilor Turco.
Was that in the form of a motion?
In the form of a motion to put that before Industrial Community Development.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. President, this is just something I want to refer to the mayor's office. And several cities and towns have taken the lead in this already. As you all know, National Grid was locked out. The United Steelworkers Union was locked out of their work, and they have asked to go back to work and negotiate while working, but National Grid has decided not to let them do that. So you currently have 1,100 United Steelworkers out of work, And my concern, more so than a union issue, is qualified workers working in the cities and towns, as has come up in Braintree and several other South Shore communities. Mayors have voted to not allow the outside contractors to do work within their city because they feel that they're unqualified to do that, and it may pose a danger to the residents of the city unless it is deemed an emergency situation by National Grid. There is that exception. So I would like to move forward with a recommendation to the mayor that he follows the lead of other cities and towns until the National Grid puts the United Steelworkers, who are the qualified individuals to do this work, back to work, and not allow unlicensed or unqualified workers to do work on behalf of National Grid.
On that motion, I couldn't agree with you more, Councilor Turco. This is a group of people, this is for safety. This is the safety of our residents, of our city, and for having people who may not be qualified to do this work to be coming in our city and doing this, it's appalling. We required special permits and licenses to be able to do work of this nature, and because it's a lockout, you have other people doing it. I support your motion, and if there's anyone else, all in favor? You heard the motion, all in favor? Any opposed?
Mr. President, can I get a roll call?
You certainly can. Councilor Turco, clerk, please do a roll call.
Councilors O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes?
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
Charest.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you, Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last thing, I just wanted to thank Nancy Charest, who I happened to meet in the hallway with a bag of waters for the City Council. So that's where those came from. I didn't run to the local convenience store. So thank you to Nancy for the waters.
I would, and hesitant knowing if she's watching, I would let her know later on, but thank you. Council Melville.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to, going kind of on what Councilor Manning Martin brought up earlier, and something I've wanted to bring up in the motion to request, there's an opportunity for a regional open meeting law train by the Attorney General's office. They're now taking recommendations by municipalities if they would wish to schedule a open meeting law regional training. I think with everything you've been seeing going on in the area, with other communities having some issues regarding open meeting law, and with so many appointed committee members or board members within the city, along with elected officials, I know as elected officials and in certain other appointed positions, we take the online training, and that's great. However, open meeting law is very complex, and I think it would be great if we could get on that, if we can contact, and I can help with doing that, with getting with the Attorney General's office and maybe get a regional training open to the public, open to any elected or appointed officials, not only here in Peabody, but abroad. We have a nice big auditorium. I think it would be a great thing to do. I'm currently doing something with that with my day job, going throughout the state, and it's been well received by communities, and I think it puts to rest a lot of questions similar to what we had tonight. I think that would be a baseline for us to all operate on. So I'd like to make a motion that through the City Clerk's office, we reach out to the Attorney General's office. They have their department is the Attorney General's Office Division of Open Government. On their website, they have a link to get ourselves involved in that, and I think it would be great in the fall to have something like that around here. So that would be, that's my motion. Thank you.
We'd like to put, Councilman McGinn, I was going to think you're going to say the same thing.
I'm not sure. Through you to Councilor Melville, I think you said this, but I want to just be sure. You're suggesting this for all boards and commissions, right?
To anybody that wishes to attend.
Yeah. There was, Mayor Bonfanti had a gathering of all boards and commissions years ago, and that was the topic, and it was excellent, and sounds like there's a more formal process through the state now to enable this. I think it's a great idea. Thank you, Mr. President.
So it wasn't the same. I was saying, though, if you wanted to go in cooperation with the Legal Affairs Subcommittee on this also, with his
Yeah, I don't think it's a legal affairs matter, because I think what Council Melville is suggesting is basically to have a public meeting to educate all, not only the city council, but any members of boards and commission, any general member of the general public that might want to learn more about the law. So I don't think we need to deal with that in legal affairs. I think
That's great. As you mentioned, the laws have changed rapidly year to year. I think it's a great thing. We, in the city, we've done a campaign finance meeting group type of thing to educate. So I think it's a great cause. Thank you, Councilor Melville. You heard the motion. On the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor Melville.
Lastly, real quick, I just want to congratulate all the ward councilors for their 4th of Julys. It's not a particularly easy thing to do on the morning of 4th of July away from your family, but I think everybody did a great job, and I appreciate all the hospitality when I went. It was well done, and so I think as an at-large counselor, I got a view of what you have to deal with every 4th of July from a ward perspective, and I think you all did a great job, and I appreciate the hospitality you showed me and the residents within the wards. Thank you.
Thank you. I only have two informational. The 19th, Thursday the 19th of next week, we'll be holding a meeting at the Smith Barn at 6:30 for the residents. It could be all residents, but specifically the residents of Brooksby Farm with the issues of the water pressure. We have been for years with issues there. Some information is now with us. The mayor will be conducting with myself and the appropriate departments here in Peabody to talk about those issues. With that, I'd like to take item 8H, a letter from a constituent on Stewart Road. Move to accept the letter. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Someone make the motion?
So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Just another thing, that as the summer's going on, and one of the things I've been seeing quite a bit throughout the city in different wards is that where there's one lane of traffic and the travelers decide to make a second lane of traffic, keep in mind there is people in that lane who's not expecting you to come down the right-hand side or the left-hand side. It's a one-lane traffic. There's a reason. But these cars are zipping across the yellow lane, going into the other lane so they can get down to where the intersection would allow them to turn left or right. Please be in consideration of the children that we have and the people who drive through the city who expects when there's signs that say single lane traffic that you utilize it as a single lane traffic. Somebody is going to get killed. It may take you a couple more minutes to get through our streets, but it's going to be a serious incident if the traffic continues. We had the sergeant here talking about it, and just before he got here, 1 hour before that, he had to pull somebody over for that exact reason. He said last week he gave out 162 tickets in that same intersection for people going over the yellow line to get down to the intersection. I beg you, please honor the roads as a single lane. Thank you. With that, Councilor Gould, will you take us through the rest of the motions?
Take us home. Motion to receive item 7A. That's 7B, I meant to say. I'm sorry. 7B. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to receive item 7C, if that hasn't been done already. Okay, that's done. Motion to receive item 8A. So moved.
Hear the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to receive item 8B. So moved.
Hear the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to receive item 8D, and D is done. Motion to receive item 8E.
8E.
On the motion, that's
Approve all papers being in order.
Ward 4. Council, Mr. President.
Okay.
484 Lowell.
Is 8E?
It's in Edward.
I'm sorry? Yes, I know you're saying, but I think we had, so make a motion to accept 8E and approve. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. It's again another late night here.
Sorry, thank you, Ally. Motion to receive item 8J.
8J, heard the motion. All in
It's done.
favor?
Excuse me. The fiddler on the roof here is talking in my ear. 10A, motion to receive.
Mr. President, on that, Mr. Council, my apologies. On that 10A, I'm just trying to figure out how we can adopt as advertised 10A when we just heard it tonight in subcommittee. So I was curious as to that one. Colleen, I hate to put you on the spot. Maybe you want to call Tim. You could phone a friend if you'd like. I'll ask Councilman McGinn. Councilman McGinn, any idea as to how we can adopt as advertised item 10A when we just heard it before subcommittee?
The 10A, I don't think deals specifically, Counselor, with a speed limit, though, does it?
But, no, I believe 10A is the ordinance change to add the fines to, at the Higgins Middle School, if I'm not mistaken, in the safety zones at the Higgins Middle School that we just heard tonight. I'm not quite sure if maybe because it's a city fine that we don't have to advertise it, but I'm not quite sure of that.
So you're saying they're one and the same? That's.
It does look like one and the same, exactly what we discussed. Okay, the clerk, assistant clerk tells me that we received it and advertised it earlier than the, so then I'll let you continue with your motion, Counselor.
There's four of the same group, please. You did such a good job.
Mr. President, move to adopt as advertised item 10A, receive and adopt as advertised item 10A. Mr. President, I move to receive and adopt as advertised item 10B.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Mr. President, I move to receive and adopt as advertised item 10C.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Yeah, Mr. President, I move to receive and adopt as advertised item 10D.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to adjourn.
Sorry, councilors. I think we have, how about 7B? 7C?
7B was done,
Already
7C
done.
is done, it's all done.
Thank you, councilors. 1 minute, councilors.
I was giving you that.
I think Councilor Sasslaw, did Councilor Sasslaw get that? Oh, the plan.
Can I have a motion to accept the plan? Councilor Sasslaw, Farm Ave.
Yep, motion to receive.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Okay. Motion to adjourn. Good night, folks. Have a good summer. Yeah, I just want to make a note that Colleen and Allison did a fantastic job.